In this video, we're going to cover strategies for leaving a work, particularly retiring from work that feels like it's been your calling. Now, even if you don't identify with the term calling, if your work provides you with a sense of purpose and meaning, you want to stick around and hear about these strategies for leaving that kind of work and finding the freedom to move into post-career life. Hi, I'm Don Tebbe. Since 1993, I've led succession planning workshops and retreats for well over 1,000 retirement-age nonprofit executives. And one of the things that really struck me, a sticking point, and no pun intended, is why some of these executives seem to be superglued to their jobs. For some, it was because they hadn't envisioned a post-career life that they were excited about, so the familiarity of work seemed like the easier path forward. For others, the grip that the job had on them seemed like it was deeply psychological, like they had a moral duty to do the work that they were doing. And this led me to do a deep dive on the topic of callings and calling-like work. I was looking for ways to loosen that grip that callings seem to have on us, loosen it up so it gives us the freedom to invest ourselves and our time and energies in post-career life. And what I learned is that whether you call it a calling or not, the fundamental characteristics of callings have become infused in our thinking about work in our society. It's deeply embedded in our culture around work. So before we get into the strategies for loosening that grip, let's understand why that grip is so powerful and pervasive. First of all, let's look at the three ways of looking at work. Now, people view their work in different ways. For some, it's a job, a source of money and security. Their life satisfaction and meaning is found outside of work. Others see their work as a career, a source of achievement and advancement. And for still others, it's a calling, a deep source of meaning and sense of purpose. Now let's turn to the characteristics of a calling. Callings have long been associated with religion, but researchers have found strong parallels between religious and secular callings. They say that callings, whether religious or secular, have three characteristics. First of all, callings involve an external summons or a call from an outside source. For some, that's God or a higher power. For others, it's a response to a social need, the needs of one's country, a family legacy, such as a profession or a business. And for still others, it's a sense of destiny that develops over time. Second, callings provide a source of meaning and purpose. The work has deep meaning and is aligned with one's sense of purpose about life. And third, the work serves the greater good. What you're doing helps others either directly or indirectly. Let's look at some implications of having a calling. First, for people with a calling, work is often not separate from the rest of their lives. Someone with a calling isn't working for money or career advancement, but for the fulfillment that the work brings them. And many people with callings report that they would continue to do the work even if they weren't getting paid. Second, a calling is an attitude or an approach to work rather than the objective characteristics of the job. Now, let me underscore that. The calling is associated with how the work makes us feel rather than the particular role. And as we'll see later, that separation between the feeling and the role will be particularly important when we get into the strategies for leaving a calling. And third, callings aren't limited to the world of paid work. For example, parenting and child rearing are roles where people can experience having a calling. And many people say that their avocational work feels like a calling to them. I also want to point out that callings have become secularized and pervasive. Before the Protestant Reformation, having a calling was synonymous with having a religious role. But the Reformation redefined all work as a calling. Callings were no longer limited to a specific set of occupations. Instead, callings became an attitude towards work. And then during the 18th and 19th centuries, that work ethic became widely secularized and secular notions of calling began to emerge. And that secularization continued during the 20th century. Best-selling books such as Habits of the Heart and interest in Viktor Frankl's writings, for example, kind of fueled the appetite for a growing public interest in the meaning of life and meaning of work. Increased academic research and theory that led to the development of new tools and strategies to help managers and workers elevate the meaning of work, for example, through job crafting. So today, while the term of calling clearly has religious roots and still shares some of those trappings, much of our thinking about meaningful work is infused with those three characteristics of callings that we pointed out earlier. I also want to point out that not all callings are delivered from on high. If you didn't hear the voice of God, that doesn't mean that you don't have a calling. The research says that callings can be delivered, discovered, or developed. Now, some people report that their calling was delivered to them by an external source. For others, it was discovered. They felt a sense of destiny about finding the work that they were meant to do. And for still others, their sense of calling was something that developed over time. The work became a perfect fit, matching their interests, values, and skills. But, and here's the important point about this, the source of the calling doesn't affect job and life satisfaction so long as you're feeling that you're living out your calling. And callings aren't binary. There isn't a sharp defining line between having a calling and not having a calling. Instead, people can have either a stronger or a weaker sense of calling. And a sense of a calling can increase over time. The deeper one's engagement in the role associated with calling, the stronger the sense of the calling. Plus, the people you associate with can deepen your sense of the calling, particularly if you socialize with people in the same role or colleagues in the same profession. And who doesn't do that? I also want to point out that callings have pluses and minuses that impact how we leave the role. The research says that people with a calling can experience greater meaning in life, higher overall life satisfaction, and lower incidence of depression than people without a calling. And work that's a calling has also been linked to stronger commitment to one's profession, increased clarity about one's self-concept, longer job tenures, greater enthusiasm for life and jobs, less job-related stress, and higher job performance and job satisfaction. And people with a calling are more likely to use constructive approaches to cope with challenges and less likely to use avoidance as a coping mechanism. This is all good stuff, but callings can have a dark side. People with a greater sense of calling are more willing to make sacrifices such as time, income, comfort, even well-being for the sake of their work. And there's also increased potential for workaholism, the opportunities for organizational exploitation, and possible tensions between management and workers when one or the other of these groups has a stronger sense of calling. So, if you're faced with leaving work that's been your calling, what can you do? Now, before you retire, here are 3 things that you can do. First of all, supplant. Identify post-retirement activities that provide that sense of meaning and social contribution that you associate with your calling. And remember, a calling is an orientation towards work, not the specific type of work. It's the fruits of the work, not the specific role that's meaningful. Now, that might be a commitment to your field or serving a particular population or aspect of society. Some examples of supplanting might include post-career consulting work, serving as an interim executive, or serving as an executive coach in your former field or profession. Of course, there's also volunteering with organizations that serve that population or that aspect of society that's been the subject of your calling. The second strategy is to wind down your calling through a gradual withdrawal from working life. An example of this approach is phased retirement, which might involve a pre-retirement reduction in hours as you wind down your role. And the third strategy is to listen for other callings from other spheres of your life by consciously rebalancing your life portfolio, investing your energies in other domains of your life. Now recall that callings can be discovered or developed, not just delivered. And as pointed out earlier, the boundaries between work and private life can become blurred and arbitrary if you have a calling. And work that's a calling has a way of crowding out these other aspects of our lives and depriving them of our attention and our energies. This might be the time to pay closer attention to those areas of life that received the short shrift over the years, and in the process, you might discover that you have a new calling. Of course, these strategies aren't mutually exclusive. You can combine them. Now, if you're already retired, here are 3 things that you can do. First, maintain your calling. Continue to engage your calling elsewhere through bridge employment or encore career or volunteer activities, seeking out different work that provides that sense of meaning and purpose, but with a change of venue. Second, reframe. Reclaim yourself from your calling by refocusing on your own needs, reclaiming your rights over your schedule and commitments, and declaring your right to be retired. And third, redefine. Use the freedom of post-career life to be open to a new calling. Discover or develop a new calling through activities such as volunteer work or within other areas of your life, such as your family. Now, one final point, callings aren't necessarily something that you have to leave at retirement's door. A recent study that looked at callings among retirees found that majority, over 75%, perceived that they were pursuing a calling in retirement, and nearly 2/3 of them said that their calling involved serving others and the greater good. Of course, serving others and the greater good is one of those critical aspects of callings, and it's a major source of life satisfaction in retirement. If you feel a sense of calling about your work, you may experience some angst as you move towards post-career life. Callings touch on core existential questions such as, why are we here and what are we supposed to do? And all transitions poke at these questions. As we've seen, a calling is an orientation to the work, not the role itself. As we've also seen, callings aren't necessarily just delivered, they can be discovered and developed. And post-career life can provide you the freedom to explore unanswered callings or create a calling that you haven't yet imagined. You have power, you have options, and you have choice over those options. You have the power to compose the post-career life, to extend your calling, declare it complete, or develop a new calling if that suits you. Now, leaving work that feels like a calling is just one of the many topics covered in the Nonprofit CEO Succession Roadmap, your guide for the journey to life's next chapter. It's a comprehensive guide to exit planning for soon-to-retire nonprofit executives. And it covers preparing for the personal, professional, and the emotional journey that lies ahead. It's available now from Amazon. Thanks for watching. I hope to see you back here for another video where I help nonprofit executives and boards navigate executive director succession and the other big transitions in their leadership journey.